Hello, welcome to McBoss Capital channel. My name is Michael Chu. This is US stock market recap video for the week ending June 12, 2026. So we have the Space Exploration Technologies Corp SpaceX IPO on Friday. Believe it was priced at 135, it opened at 150, it closed around 161. So it did climb pretty high, but it kind of came back down. So it went as high as 176, but it did close near the bottom range of the day. So we'll see how this continue. I don't generally trade IPO unless I see some sort of pattern forming in the next few weeks. But this helps lift the market, and also news of US-Iran possible peace deal signed over the weekend. But again, who knows whether that will actually happen. But that lifts optimism for the market. Here's the Nasdaq composite chart. We did suffer a huge drop the week before, and we suffer more drop this week, early this week. And however, we did rebound by the end of the week, and you can see we on the weekly chart here, we are sitting above the red line, and we also closed positive for the week. 0.7%, not a lot, but still we end up positive because it was not looking good. By Wednesday, you can see Tuesday and Wednesday here on the daily chart, it went as far as near the red line. And you know, even Thursday morning we're still testing it. So we had 3 days of testing the red line here, and then we start to bounce back on Thursday, close at the top, very strong move there. Again, news that US won't hit Iran that night with full force. That helped lift the market intraday. And then on Friday, again, we have the SpaceX IPO, which is very big hype. It did close on the green side, so that's a good thing. And that also helped the market also close in the middle range here. So not quite at the top, but in the middle range. So we have the green line 10-day and 21-day coming down right now, and they're both around the same level of around 26,000 here. So we are just slightly below it, 25.88, and not too far away from that mark. So we'll see how we continue next week. If we do break above 26,000, that will climb back above the 10-21-day line, and that might be a good sign for the market as it potentially could recover. You know, whether this would be a V-shaped recovery or whether it will start to fall apart again and start to test the red line once again. So those are the two potential scenarios that could happen in the near future. Here's S&P 500 on the weekly chart here. We also see the bounce here after the previous week's losses. So it closed up 0.6%. And on the daily chart, we also see very similar action around near the red line, the 50-day moving average. We also tried to test that near that level, and we did bounce back on Thursday, closed at the top of the range, and it was still under the 10 and 21-day. And then on Friday, we pretty much closed near the 10-day and just slightly above the 21-day. So from that perspective, S&P just looked a little bit better than Nasdaq, whereas Nasdaq is still a little bit below those moving average. This is Invesco S&P 500 equal weight ETF, symbol RSP. This is actually making new high at the moment. So this really tells us a different story in the market, where more stocks are, the broader stock market is actually rallying from the S&P 500 index. So that is very interesting. Here's the direction on Nasdaq 100 equal weight ETF. This one also shows the Nasdaq 100 is way above the 10-21-day at this moment, also showing broader strength in the Nasdaq 100. So these are good signs for the market rally right now if we can continue this momentum. Here's Dow Jones Industrial on the weekly chart, also bouncing back. And this week early move down and near the red line here and closing up 0.6% for the week. On the daily chart, we can see it clearly pierce through the pink line 21-day, which is not bad. We didn't even come close to the red line here, and we bounced. On the first bounce here on Thursday, we actually came back above the green line, and then on Friday, it followed through, and now we are at new high. Sorry, that was not new high. It's pretty close to new high. Last week we had the new high here. Next here we have Russell 2000 index here on the weekly chart, also bouncing back very strong. You can see it actually bounce off and make a new high this week, closing very strong, up 3.9%. On the daily chart, you can see it was struggling around the 1021 day, but it actually was able to bounce back after 2 times undercutting it on the next day. And here on Thursday, we're able to bounce back and close way above the 10-day. And on Friday, we bounced to new all-time high. Very interesting. Here's the CAP4 IBD 50 ETF. It also bounced very strongly. You can see it actually even came down near the 200-day or 40-week moving average here, the black line. And we climbed back above the red line here. And we actually closed at pretty much a new high, I believe. It looks very close to a new high. Okay, on daily chart, you can see it better. It didn't make a new high, but it came very close to it. So on Friday, you can see we bounced off the black line here, red line. Thursday and Friday, we continue to climb. And yeah, we're very close to new high though. So this is another outperforming index for the small cap. Here's the 10-year Treasury note index here, also coming back down below the 10-day, 21-day, just slightly here at 4.48%. This is the US dollar index. It was pretty much sideways movement this week. So, but it is still on kind of uptrend here near the 10-day line. The oil price actually came back down this week. You can see it was facing resistance near the 1021 day. And then Thursday, Friday, it came down after this news about potential peace deal this weekend. So this week the gold hit new low here. It did bounce back slightly Thursday and Friday, but that's after a very severe downturn. So we are still in a pretty big downtrend at this moment. It is the same story with silver, also trying to bounce back to nearest 10-day moving average, the green line. And then we have the Bitcoin also trying to find a bottom here. It is still below the green line, so the downward momentum is still there. Here's from the IB newspaper, the New York Stock Exchange advanced decline daily line here at the bottom here. You can see it's almost reaching new high, and that's a good sign, as that is counting how many stocks up versus stocks down. So that tells that there's more stocks going up right now. It's in pretty good rally mode versus the index, which is still near, just starting to rebound. So this is a good sign that there's more stocks carrying the market rather than just the heavy weighted stocks here. So this is on S&P versus NYSE. On the Nasdaq Composite advanced decline line here, it is also bouncing, but obviously it's not near the high here. So that one is just a normal relative to the index. Here's a screen from IB newspaper here. Inflation spikes, but is it near a peak? Well, the CPI rose 0.5% on for May. You can see on the chart right here, and then the core CPI rose 0.2%, and the yearly CPI inflation is at 4.2%. So you can clearly see it is rising. And then on the core CPI is also rising now to 2.9. So, but oil prices are coming off a little bit, so we'll see how this continues. So next week we have the first FOMC meeting with Federal Reserve Chair Kevin Walsh, so that'll be interesting. And then we have some late earnings here. Play WLY, JBL, SWBI, and SP. Here's the WenX Semiconductor ETF. SMH is the symbol. We also see that the semiconductor rebounding this week. Here's the daily chart, SMH. You can see the test here on the 10 and 21 day in recent days here. We also, bounce off that, and now on Thursday you can see it climb and make a higher high here than the last 4 sessions. And then on Friday we're able to fall through as well on this rebound. Here we see NVDA on the daily chart. This one has pulled back quite a bit. It is down 13% from the high here. It was trading below the red line this week, so that's not a good sign. And it's still having trouble trying to come back above it, although it was up Thursday and Friday, but not much. We're still below the green line and the pink line here, and we're just under the red line, so it is still below all short-term moving average. So yeah, so I don't know, it's still very weak. Here's Broadcom, also not bouncing much even on Friday. Again, very weak here, below the 10, 21 and 50-day line as well. Here's TSM, slightly better. It is a little bit above the 10 and 21 day. It also tried to stay, above those lines this week. But overall, it still looks, kind of weak yet, not coming out yet. Here's ARM. ARM also bouncing back really strong. So this one is actually looking pretty good, like the actual index there. So moving up, following through on Friday on a gap up and closing at the top of the range. Here's AMD also doing similar. We're also bouncing back really strong after a recent pullback, testing all the short-term moving average. Also had a gap up and closed a little bit above the middle, so around 63% of the close range. Here's Intel also bouncing very strong here on Thursday as well. And this one also had a little bit of a pullback and somewhat of a correction in more than 4 weeks here. So it's looking pretty good. Now it's also climbed on Friday. So now we're not that far from a new high again. So this one is worth watching as well. So even with the bounce on Thursday and Friday in the general market, we didn't see that for software. This is iShares Tech Software Sector ETF IGV. It actually came down to the red line here, the 10 weeks moving average, so that's not good. On the daily chart, you can see it is on a very severe pullback here. Probably consider a correction now because it is now from the high 23%. It did come down to the red line. It's but it bounced. The bounce is very weak. It was still red for the day. Here's Microsoft. It is also pulling back now. It's below the red line, 50-day moving average, and it did have a small bounce on Friday, but again, not much at all, 0.1% only. Looking at Palantir, also doing the same thing. It's just no power at all on Friday to even bounce back. We are trading near the bottom range again. Here's Google. Google bouncing just a little bit on Thursday and Friday. Again, it didn't really close at the top of the range, which is where the 10-day is. It actually closed below the red line. So again, very weak bounce so far. And you can see the relative line is, kind of near the lows as well. Here's Amazon. Also didn't show much of a bounce on Friday here. We are trading near the lows. Again, another bad sign. So a lot of software related area just doing not very good. Here's Meta, also not bouncing very much on Thursday and Friday. So again, this is not showing very good signs for the mega cap here. But despite that, we saw the general broader market doing better. Here's Apple. It didn't really help with the developer conference this week. Probably more people expected better AI services, but nothing really prudent was announced, and so the stock actually dropped here below the short-term moving average, and now it's trading below 10 and 21 day, and also on Friday it closed down 1.5%, which is near the recent lows here, so this is not looking good. Here's Tesla. This is also trading below the 10-week this week. It did bounce back slightly by Friday, but we are still, kind of have this downtrend line forming around the 10 and 21 day. So we'll see how this continues. Obviously, SpaceX may or may not help this stock. I have no idea. Here's Netflix. Continuous downturn here. It's just very deep, severe correction. Now down 40% from the previous high. Again, this has not shown any power. It's just been constantly trading under the 10 and 21 day moving average. So it's still in a pretty deep correction here. In my next video, I'll be talking about the growth stocks list and see, there's over 50% of the stocks that are in uptrend now. So that is very surprising. Please make sure to follow that video as it comes out and see what's continue to lead the market. Thank you all for watching this. Please like and subscribe, and thank you. Have a good day.